And now we're going to our next group of two people,
Yes.
very renowned, I think particularly on this topic. We're very, very pleased to have them.
So I would like to call on stage a good friend and an Endeavor Indonesia board member, Peng Ong, serial entrepreneur of, just a few tiny billion-dollar companies, and Niki Luhur from Kartuku, also an Endeavor entrepreneur. There you go. Okay, I have been told to ask the first question.
I think she asked the best questions. Don't you all agree?
No. Good afternoon. Thank you both for being here. So Peng, I think I will start with you. So you should just Google Peng, because if I ask him to introduce himself, he would not let us know of all his achievements. But Google him, because we don't have a lot of time to share all your many achievements. The one question that I really want to ask Peng, and we talk about this a lot, is about purpose. And Peng always say to me, so he always asks everyone, what's your purpose? But the second question or statement he would make is, purpose is a choice. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think you have a very interesting view about how to think about purpose.
Yeah, so just some background on this. I deal with lots of entrepreneurs, I talk to them, and I don't just ask purpose about their purpose because it's an interesting conversation starter. Entrepreneurs that are not clear about their purpose are not very successful, because when push comes to shove, they give up, whatever. Right? So my belief, after lots and lots of experience trying to understand what drives people, is that first of all, the entrepreneur must have a purpose, right? And I've since generalized this to not just entrepreneurs, to everyone actually. But what I realized is that when you're born and you start growing up, the whole world is open to you. You can choose to do almost anything. Well, you can't grow taller. There's a bunch of things you cannot teach, right? But you can do a lot of things, right? The thing we realize about people is that what drives them is, it needs to come from inside, right? And let's say your father tells you, oh, you should be a doctor. Okay, you go to medical school, blah, 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 and you graduate. I've got friends like this. The first thing they do is they go get an MBA or something else, because it was never their purpose. They never chose to be a doctor. You're just listening to everyone. And long and short of it is, it's not just even a choice that gives you the purpose. It's the thought process of what you want to be, what you want to do. You're going to live 100 years on the planet, right? You're born and you got 100 years, then game over, right? What's that going to mean, right? Do we think about this, right? And if you do think about this, you start to converge on a few things that matter to you. That exercise that Azran gave is a reasonable one. I would start asking kids this question, right? What are you gonna do with your 100 years, right? It's going to be over soon enough, right? And what you realize is that purpose is not just something you say you have, but it's something you have to decide. You have to consciously decide. It's an act of volition. You have to decide that this is what my life is going to be about, right? Let me give the counter example. Let's say you know the supreme being on the planet or in the universe, right? And you have a conversation with the supreme being, and the supreme being says, your purpose in life is do this, do that. Go to the Amazon, do certain things. And you go, boy, that's really hard, right? And I think I'm not going to do that. So that's no longer your purpose, right? So you have to decide on your purpose, right? And the counter to that, that's a bit scary to a lot of people, and use that to scare people a little bit, is if you do not decide on your purpose, you have no purpose. If you want to have no purpose, decide not to have a purpose. And actually, even if you decide not to have a purpose, you probably at least have some clarity on that, right? A lot of people just don't decide on what their purpose is, and therefore they don't have a purpose. Right?
So purpose is a decision and an action at the same time.
Yeah, it's a choice.
Yeah.
As you
Coming to an earlier point that Sati made in another discussion, does purpose change over time?
Again, I think the previous fireside chat was a great one around purpose and what drives people. If you pick something that you change every year, every 6 months, you probably didn't quite pick a purpose. You didn't quite connect with that purpose. My purpose, the base definition of my purpose actually hasn't changed since high school, post-high school, university.
Niki, how would you think about this?
Got it.
They didn't like your earlier comments.
I think in the earlier years, it's kind of normal to not know exactly what you want to do. And in fact, if you feel like you know what you want to do really easily, you probably haven't really asked yourself the really hard questions. So I knew things that I liked. And I knew things that, I wanted to do. I had a passion for it. I knew things that I was kind of good at. But I don't think that meant that I had found my purpose, right? And I think a lot of people equate passion with purpose when it's very different. To me, passion just means you love it, right? Doesn't mean that you're necessarily good at it, right? I can be passionate about a lot of things. I can be passionate about music, but I'm a terrible musician. I'm kind of tone deaf, so there's no way I have a career as a musician. Like, that would be a terrible, terrible decision. But doesn't mean I can't love music. Doesn't mean I can't have a passion for music. And at the same time, it's not just that, but you have to actually, as an entrepreneur, it's not just about what you love and what you're good at, but also combining the opportunity, right? What problem are you solving? That you're actually creating some value, and not only creating some value, but we came back earlier to that timing discussion. But you'll get paid for that value, right? It's not just about value creation for the sake of value creation. You could be creating value that unfortunately no one appreciates today and no one's going to pay for, and you're going to be one of those early startups that just literally started way too early, were great ideas, but just didn't make it, right? So, and there's plenty of those examples.
Yeah, Van Gogh, he never got paid. All came afterwards. Yep.
So and oftentimes that's the difference between inventors and innovators, right? You have inventors that create these technologies way, way, way ahead of their time, but they never make any money off of it. They create the concept, they create the ideas, but they can't really commercialize it, right? So everyone loves to, let's say, use Jobs as an example. He didn't create the MP3 player. He didn't invent the MP3 player. The MP3 player was actually created by a small company no one's ever heard of. It's called Rio, right? And it started off with a little 8 meg flash drive. And that's how much of a geek I am. But it's little things like that there is a difference, in terms of timing and, your market position, and a business requires more than just an idea, right? You have to be able to distribute it, you have to sell it, you have to be able to find the right people, you have to scale it. There's a whole series of challenges.
Now, Peng earlier said we have to find purpose, and also said, look, if it shifts every 30 days, it's not. But is there an evolution? Did you see evolution in your purpose, or do you see that? Or is it really, you got to just find the one thing and finally go for it? And if you haven't found it, you come to the other side, you don't have purpose.
I guess, if you were to ask me sort of to talk about it in a more sort of philosophical framework, I would say, look, there's generally two types of purpose that drive people. One is sort of experiential. I would say it's sort of a hedonistic view of life. Not using that in a negative way, but your purpose is to experience the world, right? And then the other type of purpose would be a more stoic articulation of a purpose. My purpose is to try and achieve a virtue, if you ask the Romans, or to make a difference, if you ask one of us here. So I think you have to make that choice, right? Because at some point, push comes to shove, one of them has to take priority, right? Because if you want to experience the world and be out there seeing things, that might not allow you to spend too much time and energy making a difference to people, right? You can try and for combinations, which people do, right? But at some point, push comes to shove, right? So,
I would love to flip it again to the inner game, or help us here next to the philosophical be practical. Could you share, either of you, your struggle of finding your purpose and what was difficult or how you helped yourself in that point? Because the more you share, because you're highly respected, successful people, the more you can share with us, we get hope. If even you have difficulties.
Sure. I think for me, it became philosophical very early. And it was because of very unfortunate events. It was not a pretty event. Unfortunately for me, I guess, I lost my best friend in a very early age. When
How
he
old?
was 17. I was 17. So it would mentally really mess with me. It was very challenging.
Where were you? Where were you then?
I was studying abroad. I was studying in a boarding school, and literally grew up together. And that's when he was sort of one of my role models in life too. Stellar kid academically, athletically, socially, just sort of ticked all the boxes. Was really that exemplary kid. And I always looked up to him. And I was, initially it was a lot of anger, a lot of grief. It was a lot of questioning a lot of things about spirituality and my beliefs. And I think it was unfortunate that, that trauma happened very early. But at the same time, it forced me to really ask some very difficult questions in my own life. And it sort of made me forced to reflect on how short our lives can be, and that time is precious. Time is very precious. So how do we really want to live our lives? What do we really want to do? And I think it was those points that, it drove me to Tibet at one point. So one of the first things on my journey was just spending 6 weeks in a bit of an escape, as cliche as that sounds.
How old were you then?
Finding myself in Tibet.
How old were you?
I was 18.
Wow.
I was 18. Spent 6 weeks, met a whole bunch of wise lamas, and saw a completely different way of life. Just such clarity in terms of spirituality. It was very, very moving. Days that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And it was actually in those moments that I really asked myself really hard questions. And, kept it a lot to myself, but I wrote it down. I really wrote it down, and I had a lot of discussions with some of these, lamas who clearly went through a lot of sacrifice for what they believed, and sort of trying to understand what was it that drove them. Why would somebody, prostrate, which is literally going on your knees and spreading yourself on the floor for 5,000 kilometers to cross the country? Why would you do that? To the point where you have a callus this big on your forehead, and there's no joke, right? And people aren't trying to seek any fame. There's no fame. There's no glory. It's literally just because that's what they believe. And to me, that was fascinating. How somebody not only said they believe, in fact, didn't even talk that much about how much they believed it. They just did it. And you can see it physically. That's what's so crazy. And really talking to them and what what gave their life meaning. And that's, I guess, a little bit of my volition about being able to find a little bit of a mission of social impact and being able to see and see happiness from some of the poorest people I've ever met in my life that really had very little, but somehow had this amazing level of happiness within them. And it was really by giving to others. And being able to give, in fact, was one of the greatest sources of their joys. And even meeting people along the trail who would share with you some of the only food they had. You know, even though I did not need the food, but would just volunteer it and would volunteer shelter and volunteer to take you into their homes. I mean, those were some of the things that for me was extremely moving. And not just to people, but to animals. And that was what was actually really crazy, was when they started digging, you know, a little river for fish to be able to swim back upstream and complete their life cycle and to be able to lay eggs so they can complete their life's journey. I mean, I've never seen that in my life before. I've never seen people go out of their way to save some fish, right? Randomly in the middle of, there's no one watching, there's no TV cameras, there's no social media, there's nobody trying to do, hey, save some fish, Instagram, save some fish, you know? Nobody's doing that. And literally carry on right after that as if nothing happened. You know, nobody was trying to say, yeah, there was like, yeah, we deserve all this credit. No, just got back along with their daily life. Like, this is nothing.
That's real purpose. Right?
Wow.
Yeah, I think we've sort of left the realm of startups a few minutes ago, and but that's what I love about startups. You know, it almost forces you. It makes you think about these basic things. Why am I doing this? Because you are being pushed to the max in the startup. Actually, it's not too bad. You live, right? But it's very, very high stress activity for human beings to engage in. So you better be very, very clear on why you're trying to do this. You know, but the one thing that I find that a lot of really smart people have a tough time with, trying to decide on their purpose, is because they'll ask themselves, really? Is this my purpose? Why is it really my purpose? And after, again, talking to many, many folks, one basic assumption I have now is actually beyond, this is where faith comes in, beyond a decision, the other thing you need to be, I guess, successful relative to your purpose is faith, right?
Faith.
Faith. This is really, really weird. It's not necessarily a religion. It could be, but the minimum faith you need is that the decision you made for yourself, for your purpose, is the right one for you and for the people around.
How do you get faith?
This is really hard. If you don't have faith, you're condemned to question yourself over and over again. And you know, if you imagine any kind of professional or business person or entrepreneur that doubts everything he or she is doing, they're going to fail, right? So you have to have faith that what you decide on for yourself is the right thing for you or for the people around you. And if you don't, you're going to have a really tough time.
Well, thank you. You have a question?
No, I'm just thinking it's like Wednesday afternoon, and this is like a really deep topic. So just to summarize, to make it a little lighter, so what I hear is purpose is a decision, it's a choice that you need to act on, and in doing so, you need to have a leap of faith that that is the right purpose for you.
Well, I think it's, there are things along the way that can serve as clues, right? Within Kartuku, there were certain moments within my career and specific things that we did in terms of projects that meant a lot to me. And it wasn't always because of, it's the biggest contract. Of course, those are great, right? Land a huge contract, yeah. Landed my fundraising rounds, yeah, celebrate, right? I mean, those are fantastic. But in fact, there were the things that were not so, they were the really difficult, that didn't exactly make the most money, but it really meant a lot because there were experiences of, you saw, at least we saw as a team, how much we made an impact on, for example, some of our projects around welfare. And it was those projects, in fact, that we would talk about in our town halls. Those are the things that we would celebrate. Those are the things that brought us together, was a true financial inclusion story. It was not there to be a tagline, right? It was there because we did it, we would have to do things of events that were, you have to set up 500 merchants in 24 hours physically, extremely difficult, but all these micro merchants, it was their first time to it. It was about getting SMEs, included, getting traditional SMEs included, and it was tough. But literally the whole company bent over backwards, worked 24 hours, and those were like some of our proudest moments. We seeing a woman receive, subsidies for meat during Lebaran. I mean, she broke down in tears. And it was that was one of the most moving moments for us. And those are the things that ended up sort of giving us clues of what defined us, what defined our identity, what defined our purpose, what we wanted to achieve. And I think over time it became clearer and clearer. It's not necessarily something that just shows up one day. I mean, you have to ask yourself those questions, and it's not something that you'll necessarily know at the very beginning. And I think earlier Natalie was talking about opportunity or purpose first. Sometimes you may not know your purpose, and that's totally fine. And sometimes working on your opportunity, you'll end up finding these moments that are truly personal, are truly emotional, and you find it's something that's bigger than your company, it's bigger than you, and something that you really want to participate in.
Well, thank you for sharing.
So I'm going to close this session with this last question to both of you. I mean, Peng, you've built multiple billion-dollar companies, and Niki, you just had a very successful exit late last year. Do both of you consider you've achieved success at this point of your life?
Certainly for me, not yet. Not yet. I'm not done yet. I think we have a lot of momentum going on right now. We have an amazing president, President Jokowi, all the way.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! He has a truly noble cause right now. He's trying to drive financial inclusion to 75% by the end of next year. He means business, and we're proud from the Fintech Association to try and do our part to help, to try and mobilize the industry, to try and give input to the government about how we can help and what the industry needs. And you asked me 5 years ago whether or not I would be in front of governments in terms of doing policy advocacy. I would be like, no way. I would never want to touch that. I would want to stay as far away as possible. And here I am now, just because in the end it's that purpose. It's about, hey, I want to try and help. I want to try and help. I believe I know the tactical strategy. I know the details of execution, the technology, the people who can get it done. And it's worth a shot. It's worth putting in your time and effort just to try and see it happen. So, not done yet, much bigger goals ahead. Not all of them are necessarily financial goals. I think for me, like metrics for success in life, I think number one is how many lives you impact. It's not how much money you have in your bank account. So for me, it's more about that. That's my personal version. But, and it's specifically financial inclusion, just because I'm a fintech guy. So it's kind of geared in that way. But, more and more, I hope to be able to be part of the communities, supporting more entrepreneurs, seeing more entrepreneurs grow, help mentor, hopefully many of you in this room, help you see through and find potentially your passion, your purpose, and scale your businesses, and hopefully help, be a bridge in some cases with the government to try and advocate what policies you need. And I think Peng can help on the capital. So then we have the whole ecosystem running, right? So that's the idea.
Niki Luhur, Endeavor Entrepreneur, everyone. Peng, yeah, last words.
I think, Nikki, if I know you, you will never be done. You will always be pushing to make that one more difference. And I think this is why we talk about purpose, because if you have a purpose and it really defines you, you will never stop trying to make that difference as you move forward in life. I've done many companies. You know, each one of them I could go, yeah, that was successful, but it was successful from a financial perspective. Maybe it developed some people, but I think success in life is basically as simple as living to your purpose, having a purpose and living to it. And then if you take that definition, you never stop. You never stop living for that purpose.
Thank you very much. Give them both a hand. Thank you so much. Wow.